Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about savings. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Hi Frederick, I'm a 34-year-old software developer and I only have around $20,000 in savings. And although I'm working as a software engineer and I have a well-paid job, I'm not sure if I'm doing things correctly. What would be your advice? My advice on what? Saving money? Well, I'm not the really good person to ask about. I mean, for me, I really don't know how long $20,000 will cut it in the U.S. Like I don't live in the U.S. I've visited this North America on on only one occasion, and I went to Florida to just yeah. So I can't really tell you how the saving system works in the U.S. I can only give you the the way that I kind of treat this. So something you should know about software engineering is that there is a life cycle to your career, and how you manage your career is going to determine quite a lot on what your total, like your capacity for earning money is. And we can talk a little bit about that, and then I will give you some slightly opinionated advice on how to deal with your finances, at least if you ask me. And I'm very low effort when it comes to that sort of stuff. But hopefully you find something useful in all of this. So let's talk about your career cycle first and foremost. So the lifespan of your career is going to look something like you start by learning how to program. Now, depending on how you go about that, you're going to start at either, like, I mean, if you have here in Scandinavia, education is free, which means that we only really need to pay for like living accommodations and food while we study. So we don't really we don't owe schools money necessarily. Like some of us do, of course, just because like just living and studying full time costs money. But it's not like in other parts of the world where you actually have to pay for the courses themselves. And so if you're self-taught, you're not going to be at as big of a deficit most likely as if you have gone through a full college education. So it's pros and cons, but we all start at some point, right? And then your first challenge is going to be to get that first job, which is the hardest part usually in software engineering, at least for the first part of your career, like the at least up to the 50% point mark in your career. So once you get that first job, it is now very important that you understand something, and that is that you can now go down one of two routes in general terms. You can try to optimize your initial salary, and you can try to get quality experience. Now, this is very important because if you are, as I can imagine, if you're a college kid and you've just come out into the workforce, you got your first job, and you are offered a fairly well, I don't know if how much of an expectation you have on salaries and stuff like that, but it might be more money than you probably seen in other occupations. It might be very tempting for you to try to maximize your paycheck early on. Now, I'm here to tell you that if that is something you absolutely need to do, do it, but if at all possible, try to optimize for quality experience because it will feel counterintuitive, but it's very similar to I like to do the analogy make everybody knows I love to make analogies to the gym. If you go through the motions, if you lift weights with good form, you will actually, even though it might take you longer to get up to the higher weights, you will actually become much stronger than a person who kind of cheats all the way, because even though they might get to higher weights quicker, they're not actually building as much strength as you are. This is a very similar sort of situation because if you go for the high paycheck and you don't get quality experience, you will actually see that you either get stuck in that position, like that role, or you might not be able to get promotions and get further up the ladder in your career because you're simply not accumulating quality experience. And that is the thing that will get you to really big money at the later stages in your career. So that's something everybody has to make that way of, because if you're not, like, you should also know that just because you get quality education doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the really biggest, like the biggest paychecks, because there's a lot of personal ambition involved as well. But overall, getting quality education is a very good thing because it will give you job stability. You have no idea how many semi-senior mid-level developers who think that they're in the green just because they made it into the industry, and then they've actually only learned how to work in a very weird or specific way, or something that isn't really in line with what the industry is asking for. So when they want to go to another company, they're actually struggling to get any type of employment, because you mean you have the years, but your skills do not reflect those years, if that makes sense. So that's one part that you need to be aware of as a software developer. You need to be sort of in tune with what the norm of software development is in your region. You need to have your ear to the ground a little bit and know kind of the tools that people are using and what's popular and what's not so popular, and so forth and so forth. And this continues now, and if you're doing everything correctly, you should be taking on more and more responsibility. Now, I'm not talking about becoming a manager here. I'm saying that you start out by just trying to learn the tools of the trade. And when you have learned the tools of the trade, in other words, just be able to produce code, you should start to upgrade and start looking at, okay, how can I be more involved in, say, the planning of work, in architecture, in operations type of work, in security. Like, you should expand your knowledge outside of just knowing the code, and be a little bit more broad. And before you know it, you will reach a point where you can't really organically, and this usually happens over a few years. This is going to take years to do this, and ideally you should do this by moving from a few companies, because it really is a good idea in general terms for a software developer to move between a few companies at the very least. So to see different perspectives, look at it as career traveling. It's good to do a little bit of traveling just to see the world and see what's out there. Because if you only have one reference point, it's really hard for you to determine how well you're doing in comparison to everybody else, and like kind of where your place in the market is, and so forth. And at some point, you will get to a level where you can take on a team lead position or something like that, where you're actually this is where I like to say that this is the fork for practically every software developer, where you can either go into management or you can continue as a software developer, or like stay in the technical sphere. And there are many ways. Okay, I can't go through all of the ways that you can handle this, but when you have reached this point, guys, you will out earn. I promise you will out earn the people that they got the bigger paychecks in the beginning of things, but they don't actually have quality experience. If you get to be a true senior level developer, people will throw money at you if you know your shit, because these are the developers they are the gold standard of the industry. These are the people who will get all the perks, they get all the recruiters, everybody wants them in their company, because if you get one of these people in, it's all but guaranteed that you're going to get a really hefty return on investment. So what I want you to take away from this is that I think that if you are 34 and like you're concerned about your savings, you should start thinking about your career development, because if you want a long, prosperous career within software development, it is important for you to remember that you start out not earning all that much, but as you grow as an individual and you get more solid and more senior within your role, you should be taking on a broader and broader responsibilities set, and that should reflect in bigger compensations. Now, at some point you're going to get to a level where, like, you're getting a little bit older, maybe in your 50s or so forth, and your market value is going to start dropping if you haven't developed. If you only stick to the coding and that's the only thing you focus on, you're actually going to be less and less valuable, because people don't want to hire someone who is very that is older but doesn't provide more value than somebody who is younger, if that makes sense. And finally, I will tell you, and this is an opinionated thing, try to learn how to live within your means. Because the thing is, guys, at least I feel this way. I am actually much happier if I feel that I have a good amount of savings than I am from buying the newest television all the time, or the new clothes and so forth. Because the thing is, guys, I like to say to my friends who have a problem with finances, if you buy a new television, let's say you're really fanatic about that sort of thing, after 6 months after you bought that thing, it's just going to be something you take for granted. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't have any value to you anymore, and then the only way for you to get that high from purchasing something from the purchase is to buy another one, and then another one, and then another one, just to get that sensation of satisfaction. And although that might feel nice for the moment, it's really only a patch over something much broader or something bigger. You have a need to fulfill yourself, and there are better ways to fulfill yourself. And I can promise you, nothing relieves stress, at least for me, as much as knowing that I could get fired tomorrow, or I could just decide to travel the world right now, right here. I can tell my boss to fuck off and quit my job, and I'm going to be perfectly fine because I've saved enough money by not buying stuff that is just kind of like for the moment. So now I can, and now I have a peace of mind, and that peace of mind is more valuable, at least to me, than all the one-off, like the latest thing and so forth. I mean, this is a Samsung S7, and it still works. I don't feel a need to buy a new phone until this thing is so broken that it doesn't do it for me anymore. And although that might sound ridiculous, the money that I have saved on not buying the latest phone every single time a new one comes out is worth 10 times any phone to me. Have a great day.